Welcome back to the Biscuit and Gravy podcast.
Today we are going to be picking up kind of where we left off. We're going to start back at when we were younger. It's going to be around 2017, maybe 2018. As always, as I'm going to say this at the beginning of every single one of these episodes, things that could be mentioned, not guaranteed, but possibly, are drug addiction, poverty, homelessness, abuse, just everything kind of in that domestic trigger warning tag, I would say. Um, it can and will be mentioned at some point. Not necessarily this episode, but do be prepared for that because it's a big part of our past.
Yeah.
So today we're going to kind of start off around, I would say, when I was in, I think, first or second grade. That's when things in our life kind of started being like questionable when it comes to the childhood we had. Um, and before I say this part, I want to say there's nothing like inherently wrong about these things. It is the context of which we experience them that makes them wrong. But the main thing that we're going to start off with is our first experience being like technically homeless together. Um, it just in general was when I was about second grade. We moved into a hotel, and that's kind of where things took off. From there on is when things were like really bad. I almost guarantee that Gravy would remember a lot more about it, because at the time I was a kid, I was just kind of going through the motions of life, being like, if there was something to be worried about, someone else would tell me. Looking back on it, there was inherently issues with how we were living. We were pretty much entirely surviving off of the McKinney-Vento Act. If you don't know what that is, a brief summary is the McKinney-Vento Act is I don't remember if it's like a law, policy, I think it's some type of policy in the US where children and families suffering from poverty get assistance from the school district. So, for example, we lived in a different town than I went to school in. But because our circumstances for moving were because of poverty, we fell under the McKinney-Vento Act, and they were able to bend the rules to allow me to go to the same school, even though I lived in a different district. And they helped get me to school. That's what the van system I was a part of was. They used school vans for different things, but that's why I took the van. And same with Gravy. Do you have anything you want to say about that?
And that's not even remembering before you would remember. Like, you might remember briefly a little bit of it, but there were times where we lived in hotels and stuff like that before, like when you were like a baby, like baby to like 2 years old.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I remember living in the camper. I remember as young as 1, but I don't really remember living in a hotel or stuff.
Yeah, there were a couple times where we stayed in hotels briefly. But the hotel that you're referring to, that's probably the one we stayed in the longest.
For sure.
So
We stayed there 2 times, actually. There was kind of a brief intermission between our 2 long-term stays at that hotel. I'm pretty sure we were in the same room both times. But while we were there, it was like, it to set the scene, it was like this really kind of like not a great motel. It wasn't even a hotel, it was a motel.
it's a
And
dingy motel.
yeah, and like there was mold in the rooms. It was just not great. And had we been there under different financial context, that would have been fine because it's what was able to be provided. It's like just kind of the things that led up to that, which even now I kind of don't really understand how it got there. I know that there was some tax evasion. I know that there was some tax fraud. And I know that there was drugs. I can't piece together the story because it's a
Girl, I
complicated
didn't
one.
even know about the tax evasion and tax fraud.
Yeah. For context on that, because that's a little tiddlywink of lore that if we just drop, it's gonna be like hello. But the lore on that is that my it's handled now. They've like paid it off. I'm pretty sure they finished paying it off this year, or they're gonna finish paying it off next year. But what happened is my mother went into like $15,000 worth of IRS debt because when she did her tax forms, she claimed the max amount of dependents, like 10 dependents, even though she only had two. Um, and in doing so, they took a lot less taxes because they were like, oh, this woman has children. But then they caught her because obviously when she did her taxes, they were like, wait, what? It doesn't add up. And they were like, okay, give us our money. They're getting their money now. But she did that because they wanted extra money for drugs. So that, because my mother always kind of, or our mother, I keep saying my mother, but our mother kind of operated under the thoughts that she could simultaneously give us a normal childhood and be an addict. And that's just not feasible. No matter what tax bracket you're in,
I
that's
mean,
not
for
feasible.
me, my childhood was fairly normal. It was a
Can't
little
relate.
bit after you were born when it started being like not normal.
Sorry.
Like, well, actually, around after you were born, it's before you were born is when they started doing drugs. But um, like my childhood up until I was about, I want to say like 13 was pretty normal. Like I didn't really experience poverty in the sense that like I knew we were poor or anything like that until I was like 13. And
Oh,
I didn't realize there was anything wrong with our life until I was 17.
I remember growing up knowing we were poor. And honestly, the first red flag to me, quite frankly, was the fact that it wasn't even a red flag of poverty. It was a red flag of something here is weird. Now I know that it's actually more normal than little old me thought it was, but my parents dead ass refused to talk about finances. Like entirely, they were like, no, we will not talk about the rent price. We will not talk about the bills. We will not talk about the car. We will not talk about gas. We will not talk about paychecks. Nothing. And that's kind of the mentality I grew up with like, because anytime I asked like, how much do you make, our mother specifically would get very defensive. She'd be like, you don't need to know that. And now I'm like, okay, that's more normal than I thought it was as a kid. But I also know that that was under the context of like she was hiding finances because me and Gravy are, despite how dumb we are, very smart, and we would have pieced it together much sooner if they talked about finances.
Oh yeah, no, I for sure would have pieced two and two together when, if you hear my husband in the background, ignore him. Anyway, I definitely would have put two and two together where I would have been like, but you're making this money, but you can't give me $10 for the school dance.
Exactly.
Like I definitely would have put two and two together and been like, so the money is going somewhere else.
Exactly. And I don't remember if it was every other week. I don't remember what our mother's pay like period looked like,
She
but
was weekly.
if I remember correctly, it was like 2,000 a week. It was a lot. It was like somewhere up there. And add that on with the fact that our father was always their roles were like reversed from the traditional. You can't see me, so I'm putting air quotes there. The traditional like father works, mother takes care of the children. It was the complete opposite throughout my entire childhood. I don't know how it was before I was born, but when I was a kid, it was always my dad that was home. He was the one
Oh
that
yeah,
was
I
like,
was always like that.
he
It's
was like
always
he
been
was
that
doing the
way.
school things. He was the one at field day. He was the one chaperoning. My mother was the one. She was the breadwinner of the household. She was going to work. I think she worked 5 to 5. Honestly,
She worked like 7 to 8 to 5.
I feel like she worked like 10 hours a day.
She has had jobs where she worked that long, but like for the most part, with like the job she had the longest, she was working 8 to 5, and she was making like 22 an hour or something like that.
Okay. I remember she used to make a lot of money. Like it I
And
can't remember myself.
it's not a lot of money now, but
But then it was
put
because
put into keep in mind that this was like
10 years
10
ago.
plus years ago, and we were comfortable for the most part without her spending all that money on drugs.
Yeah.
Like we had food, we had a house to live in, we had
Well, we had an apartment.
We had a decent amount of things.
I remember throughout my entire childhood, I can hear the echo, Gravy. Gravy got a new mic, and there's a little bit of technical difficulties there, so if you guys ever hear an echo, so sorry. It's not my fault. Don't blame me. But, like I was saying, um, throughout my entire childhood, I remember there was, like, little things that just didn't make sense to me. Because I would like, but it wasn't even in the context of thinking about drugs, because I didn't find out that my parents had been on drugs until I was about, I think 11 is when I found out that they'd been on drugs throughout my entire childhood. And I crashed out. I was like, hello. Because throughout my childhood, they never, specifically my mother, never hid the fact that she used to be an addict, but she always emphasized used to be. She framed it in such a way that she's like, but that life is long behind me. I'm not like that anymore. And then I got older and I was just like, oh. And it would manifest in little ways of like Gravy said, not giving money for the school dance. I had to like beg for money for the book fair. When we lived in the hotel that I mentioned, I was doing like unpaid child labor for the owner of said motel for a can of soda. Like I would go out and shovel the sidewalks after a blizzard. Little 7-year-old me with a shovel twice my height for a can of Dr. Pepper.
Actually, it was an orange Fanta.
Was it?
Yeah,
That makes sense.
I remember.
And I'm like, but then there's other parts where it's like it's still fuzzy to me because I was a kid, and if you know stuff about psychology, you know that when you're a kid, especially if there's traumatic events, all of your memory gets fuzzed. All of it. Because your brain's natural instinct is don't remember, then it can't hurt you. So I have all the memories, but I can't put them in like a strict chronological order. And that's why Gravy has a lot more like detail, like the fact that it was an orange Fanta and not a Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, I was also
So
older.
exactly. We have a 7-year age gap.
Yeah, I'm in my
Don't let the
20s
fact that she
already.
acts like a 12-year-old boy fool you.
Shut up. But so now that we've caught up with that, how much okay, we've only been talking for 13 minutes. We have enough time to talk about the rest. Okay. So now that we've gotten all that out of the way, we're going to start talking about what led up to us moving to Colorado after we lived in Florida.
We didn't talk about Florida.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that. Don't worry. So, in 2017, we moved to Florida and we lived in a hotel for a while. Like it was, I believe, 6 months that we lived in this hotel before our mom found an apartment for us to move into.
Yeah, the first
She
time.
got a job pretty quickly, working for, I don't remember what she was doing. What was she
HVAC.
working? HVAC?
HVAC. It
Okay,
was
she was doing like HVAC things or whatever, and
no,
she
she was working as an assistant project manager for a construction company.
oh yeah, it wasn't HVAC. That this was something else. She's had a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
When we were in Florida, she worked for a construction company that made like the expensive houses in like Fort Myers, Florida, like Fort Myers, Bonita Springs,
All the
things like
beach
that. Like
houses pretty much
all
were
those big
constructed by them.
houses you see on the beach, like
Yeah.
those kind of houses.
Like with the stained glass walkways and all that. That's the company that she worked for was the one that was building most of those actually, and like Bonita Springs, if you know that area. But that company was managing like all of those houses.
Yeah, and at this time, this was like the first time in my life. I was like 16 at this time. This was the first time in my life that I had experienced her like really having money, like really being comfortable in terms of money. Um like we had enough money for rent. Like my mom could pay rent and also get extra things. She would call it extras. We would get extras.
Yeah.
We would get name brand snacks, and
We would get Doritos instead of nacho cheese crisps.
yeah, instead of crispy hexagons, we would get whatever
Hexagons?
Cheerios. I don't know, something.
Oh.
Crispy hexagons is a real cereal, by the way, that we used to eat as a kid.
Yeah.
It's kind of fire. I'm not gonna lie. It's just Chex, but it's fire.
Sometimes those off brands deserve a lot more credit than they get.
Yeah.
Like, don't diss great value.
But Florida, and I want to this day, I'm 24 years old now. I haven't lived in Florida in years. I want to move back to Florida. I love Florida. Florida is like home to me besides Connecticut. I loved living in Florida. I loved being able to go swimming on Christmas. Like, you're telling me that I could go outside on Christmas and go swimming?
Truly a fantastic experience. It was Christmas Day. We opened presents, and our dad was like, "Hey, want to go to the pool?"
Facts.
Got a 7-Eleven Big Gulp, like.
Yeah. But
When we moved there, we like Gravy said, we lived in a hotel for a while, but I'm pretty sure that we moved there with our mom already having a job lined up. Like, immediately, we moved there and she started working like the next week. And for
she didn't.
context,
That was for Colorado. In Florida, it took her a minute to find a job.
well, then they had enough money saved up. So at the start, it was a bit rough. But my point is, keep in mind the way we moved is we shoved everything important that we owned into a tiny little Honda Accord and drove 2,000 miles.
Yes. We had to rehome our cats.
We never saw. Well,
We're
that's a
not going
different
to talk about
story.
the cats.
We'll get to that later.
That'll come up eventually. But we had to rehome our cats, and it was heartbreaking and very sad. But I was really excited because, like I mentioned in episode 1, that meant I was going to see my boyfriend again, who ended up breaking up with me. So there was that.
Bachelorette core.
Don't move 2,000 miles away for a guy when you're 16. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
I did it when I was 21, but now I'm married to him, so it's not that deep.
Anyways, Florida. That is when it got really, really rough. We lived there for about 6 months, maybe 7 months before it got really rough. But we lived in an apartment complex, and my mom was working consistently. My dad, he got a job, and they were both like good jobs. He worked for a really popular burger place, and you would hear that and think, oh, so he was slinging burgers for minimum wage. No, he was getting paid like $20 an hour to sling burgers. It was a good job. Also, he didn't have to pay taxes because he was paid in cash, but that's more tax fraud, and we don't really want to talk about that. So, what happened in Florida that was largely the turning point for everything, and when I start remembering things, I can hear the echo. But largely when I start hearing things, like really remembering things regularly, is my parents found meth.
Oh my god. They claim
That's
this happened. They claim this happened in Colorado, but we are both pretty sure that it started in Florida.
It did start in Florida.
They
Factually.
both tell me. They both tell me up and down, swear to God, it started in Colorado.
Either they found meth in Florida or
Or
they
they were
found
smoking
some
just straight
really
up
fucked
crack.
up crack.
They were just smoking straight up crack. Like,
It got so bad so quickly, and there's so much that we won't talk about solely because for us that's still too much to kind of just air out to the public. But
yeah, there's things I've only talked about with my therapist and
yeah,
and Biscuit, and I will not talk about with anybody else besides my husband.
yeah, there is some stuff that's like we can't even like fathom that happened, so it just kind of stays compartmentalized.
Maybe I'll write a book someday, and then you guys will be able to know what happened.
Promoting a book that's not even planned.
It would be a fire book. Maybe I'll write a book about my entire life, but I'll claim it's fiction.
People would believe you.
And people would read it and they would cancel me because I would write such a dark, disgusting book.
And then you could come out and be like, psych bitches, that's my life.
Yeah, exactly. So, there were around, I want to say it was October. It was around October of 2019.
18,
October of 2019
19.
was when all of a sudden they were fighting all the time. Like, it went from their relationship was fine, like everything was fine, to they were fighting all the time. Like, screaming, like slamming things around, screaming. Like, our dad would like disappear for days on end, and like we were hearing accusations of cheating, we were hearing accusations of drugs, we were hearing accusations of all sorts of things. And to this day, I'm not 100% sure what really happened. I know his story and her story, and somewhere in the middle there's got to be the truth. But
I've pieced together the truth, but because we made this podcast to talk about our story, not air out a bunch of dirty laundry on our parents' behalf, I don't really want to say what factually happened, but basically what's important to know is that our dad moved out. Our mom fucking hated him, but at the same time wouldn't just like walk away because she didn't
oh yeah,
really hate him. She was just mad.
I remember one time she took, I think you were there with us, she took me, no, you were definitely there, she took us to the apartment buildings that we were living at the time, but we had moved into a hotel. We moved out because we couldn't afford rent anymore because our
Drugs.
mom had lost her job. Like, that good job that she had where she was paying for all these things, she lost it. She stopped working there.
Oh yeah, she called out embezzlement within the company.
And
Her boss didn't like that.
So I'm sorry, embezzling. Just gonna glaze past that. Anyway, so we moved out into a hotel, and one day she took me and Biscuit in the car, piled us up in the car, and we drove to the apartments because our dad was staying in one of those apartments, just not the apartment we were in, that we lived in.
No, he was staying in his boss's whore pad because his boss was married but would always take an horse home. And so his boss, who was running this super, super successful business, was just renting an apartment casually, being like, if I ever take horse home.
And we would just
I
like to
will
state
go
for the
there.
record that we are not slut shaming. This is what it was called.
True.
This is not, we don't care what you do with your body.
Like that's
Do it,
just what
queen.
the place was called.
Yeah, do it, queen.
Make
If
the
you're
money.
getting that money, do it. But anyway, she took us to these apartments, and she was like yelling at our dad. She was like, are you gonna stop this? Are you gonna stop this? Blah, blah, blah. And he's just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, we're done. We're done, bro. And it was ridiculous. It was just so much fucking stupid thing. Do you remember anything else that like is significant from the time that they started fighting to us moving to Colorado?
I
Besides
remember.
here's one thing that I'm gonna say happened that was really messed up. We had a kitten named Ender, and we had to get rid of the kitten. And
I'm
we
pretty
couldn't
sure that the
take
kitten was just let out.
No, it wasn't. We couldn't take the kitten with us to the hotel. So we left it in the apartment by himself for days on end. And we would go there. We would go there and feed him and stuff like that. But he was completely alone
Yeah.
because we couldn't take him. So one day I finally convinced our mom. I was like, this is disgusting and I'm tired of doing this. We need to find somewhere for him to go. So I finally convinced her to take the kitten and go to the hotel with it, sneak him in. And she brought him to a pound the next day because I was so sick and tired of knowing that this poor kitten, was being abandoned. And when this kitten was a Russian blue, like an actual Russian blue, like not like oh my gray cat is a Russian blue. Like this cat legitimately had Russian blue in his genes.
I didn't know that.
And yeah, it Russian blues are very beautiful cats. And he was just stuck at home away from all his people, and I mean it was just messed up.
Yeah. To this, a little side note, 2017 is also when we got our dog Oswald.
I
Um,
have him now.
yeah, he lives with Gravy.
I don't know if the mic caught it, but he was literally playing next to me like a couple minutes ago and being
That's okay.
obnoxious. So I made my husband take them away so I could record.
Yeah. He but the reason I say that is because everything that we are going to talk about from here on forward, you have to remember Oswald is there.
Oswald is there for all of it,
Oswald,
100% of
like,
it.
we didn't rehome him. We didn't, like, he was with us the entire time through
Or at least
every
with our
single
parents.
until 2021 when me and Gravy went on our own little side quest and moved out for like 6 months. But
But
that we'll get to
we'll
that
get to
later.
that in another episode.
Yeah,
Because there is also Chico, which we'll talk about
I'm
in
still mad
another
at
episode.
Chico. But the two other notable incidents in Florida, shortly, like this happened right before we moved. Um, I remember my father was, since he wasn't with us and his money was going God's nowhere, um, he didn't really like have nutrition. So I remember one day my mother kind of she used me for this entirely. She was like, "We're gonna go to the store and you're gonna pick out like a care package for your dad, and then we're gonna go bring it to him." And she used that as an excuse to get near him. At the time, she was trying to convince him to move, but she did it in the way of starting another fight. Um, and I remember that was the first time I'd seen my dad in like 3 weeks because he'd moved out and he just wasn't talking to us. Um, and I remember I gave him the package and like the bag of like there was like beef jerky, there was water, there was some food, and I found out the next day that I forget if he threw it away or gave it away, but he just didn't take it because like even though it did come from me, I was the one that had that idea. It was my mother that paid for it and like ruined it. So he just got rid of it. And I mentioned that because that's like the first really painful memory for me because that's the first time I ever felt like this is something that I'm sure anybody that's ever lived through domestic issues will agree with. That's the first time that I ever felt like I was the problem and not them. That's the first time that I was like, oh, I'm causing this. And pretty much anybody that's experienced abuse will say that they experienced something similar to that. But we like lived that. We were literally told it was our fault several times. It wasn't. But the other big memory, this is like literally like 2 days before we moved, was I woke up at like 3 a.m. We were staying in the hotel at the time and it had 2 beds. Now, previously, anytime we lived in a hotel, me and Gravy shared a bed because I was young and it was just like it was like a non-issue at the time because I was as young as I was. Obviously, if we were to be stuck in that situation as a family now, that would be weird. But I
Oh
was
yeah,
like 6. I was
yeah,
like 6, 7,
not 6, 7.
9. Shut up. Um, but this time I had one of the beds. Gravy had one of the beds, and our mother put an air mattress in between. And it was a hotel, but it was a cheap hotel. It had metal bed frames. I remember waking up to our mother screaming, sobbing, and like flailing around. And all I could remember was screaming to like cover the bars of the frame because I saw her like smash her head into it repeatedly. And I honestly think that was like a psychotic break because, drugs and mental health issues that are unaddressed. But that's when shit got real. And that's when like me and Gravy literally took like blankets and pillows from off of our bed and lined the frames with them so that she could not hit her head on this metal sharp frame. I'm pretty sure she got a concussion from that because she was delirious for a couple days.
Yeah. Shortly after that is when she told me, she sat me down. I don't know how she told you, but she sat me down and she was like, yeah, we've been doing drugs since you were like 6. And that's what's caused all of this, drugs. And I was like, oh, okay. And for context, our dad was like my hero up until this point. Like, I grew up a daddy's girl, like, really heavily. And whenever all of this stuff started, I was like, oh, so what the fuck? And our mom was like, okay, we're gonna go meet up with your father and talk in a public place that's neutral. And so we went to the mall.
They screamed at each other the entire time.
Yeah, they were yelling at each other, whatever. And then finally, one of them is like, "Do you have anything to say?" Looked at me, and I was just like, I remember I sat there so silently, and then I kind of was just like, I literally said, and I don't remember word for word what I said, but essentially what I said was, "Do you know what it feels like to find out that your hero has been lying to you your entire life?" And I don't even think they took that and understood what I was saying. Because all I remember is them getting like irritated with me for saying that. And I was like, you wanted to know what I had to say, and that's what I had to say.
Yeah.
So
So
anyway,
I didn't get the whole like revelation that they'd been on drugs my entire life until like a year and a half later. I was never told that at this time. I was I remember being so conflicted because on one hand I had our mother being like, this is all your father's fault, and on the other hand I had what I was seeing, and that was that what my our father was like with the mall incident. He was like, I'm going to just take the kids, we're going to walk around, we're going to shop. And our mother followed us around the entire time screaming at him. And I later came to the conclusion, obviously, that they were both in the wrong the entire time. But at the time, I was so conflicted. I was like, because when you're a kid, you try to make things a sense of who's right, who's wrong. Because when you're a kid, you look at things black and white. I quickly snapped out of that. Like, immediately after we moved to Colorado, I was like, oh, you're both wrong. But I never really processed that until like 2023.
yeah.
And it was messy. It was very messy.
Shortly after all of this happening is when we moved to Colorado.
We packed up everything we owned into the Kia Sorrento.
Our mother had another job at this time. She had gotten a job and she was getting transferred, and she could either get transferred from Wyoming or Colorado, or to Wyoming or Colorado. And I was like, well, we're not moving to Wyoming. And you're going to say, oh my God, you did that again when I say this. But I decided that I wanted to move to Colorado because it was only a 9-hour drive from my online boyfriend. But just so we're clear, I live with him now and we're married. So it's not that deep.
I was the best man.
But I was like, let's move to Colorado because Colorado Springs is only a 9-hour drive from my boyfriend. And so for some reason she said yes to moving to Colorado.
The reason that she said yes is because Colorado, where we moved, Colorado Springs, my father had been talking about and dreaming about since he was 19. So my mother was like, well, we're moving to Restart. So what's a better place to move than where my presumed ex-husband loved.
He is
Because
not banned
at the
from that
time when we
entire
planned the
state, by
move,
the way.
at the time when we planned the move, they were my mother was planning it as if my father wasn't going. Like she was planning it as if they were going to sign divorce papers, and then me, her, and Gravy were just going to go. That's how this was planned until last minute when our father was like, "Hell no." And then we moved to Colorado as a happy little unit right at the end of 2019.
Dog still with us.
Dog still with us. Oswald was
Dog is with
also
us through
loaded
this
into that
entire
Kia.
thing.
Yes. Oswald was also loaded into that Kia Sorento.
Yes. He was very confused, but it was not his first time in a car because we had taken road trips with him before. So,
Yes. It also, however, was the far from last time in a car.
so
Far
when
from
we
last.
moved to Colorado, it was December of 2019, and we moved to a town called Manitou Springs. It's right next to Colorado Springs and at the bottom of Pikes Peak. It's a little tourist town. It's pretty shitty there, I'm not gonna lie. Like it's really not all that. I don't know why it's such a big tourist destination. Maybe I guess I get like the history and things like that, but really aside from Garden of the Gods being right there, it's not the best town I've ever seen in my life.
So, Gravy is a liar. It is actually a fantastic town. It's just not a fantastic town to live in when your parents hate each other, and also it's COVID. Because that is something to remember. Immediately after we moved here, COVID hit. Like, literally a couple months later, and the entire world shut down. So, for the foreseeable future, all of the shit we talk about, you have to remember, like, this is, like, mid-lockdown. Like, but some kids will talk about how they were, like, learning Junko posing and shit. No. We were running across Colorado Springs trying to find our missing parents.
Yes. And Colorado, living in Colorado is actually really fuzzy for me. I don't remember a lot of it, but what I do remember is like core memories of Colorado. Like I remember borrowing the food stamp card and going up to the gas station to get milkshakes with the food stamp card.
The demonic milkshakes. The
The
meth head
demonic
insisted they were
milkshakes.
demonic and they were going to send us to hell.
Yes. And then the same guy who told us that told us that drinking Monster would make us just disappear from the earth.
He told me that drinking Monster would make me infertile. Strange thing to say to a child.
Yeah.
But he was like, there's bull piss in them. And I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Anyways. And I went on sipping
There
them.
are some weird people. Colorado is a beautiful state, but there are some weird people in Colorado, and there is a very, very, very big drug and homeless problem in Colorado.
Specifically meth. Meth is, like, arguably one of the worst drugs in terms of how it affects you psychologically. All drugs are bad, obviously, because they, like, all drugs have the power to destroy your life. But, like, a very common debate people have is, like, what's worse, meth or heroin? Well, they're both the worst in their own categories. Meth drives you literally insane. The amount of meth heads that we met and lived with, it's a fact. Meth drives you insane. It's a very common comparison people make is that a meth head thinks a lot like a 12-year-old. So, a lot of this time, I was a 12-year-old. Actually, I was 11. But the point
So,
is that throughout all of this, anytime our parents started saying some, like, absolutely, like, what the fuck are you even on about right now shit, my little 11-year-old brain was like, no, that's not crazy to say that. That's not crazy to say that. You're entirely right. There was a Plago fish
no, that's not
sucking on the
crazy.
mountain.
That's not crazy to say that.
Exactly.
But for just to really help some like whoever's listening understand the differences between these drugs and things like that and what they're like, a 99% of the people that you see on the side of the streets that you're calling a crackhead, they're on meth. Most of them are on meth.
Yeah.
Crack does make people act like that, but a lot of people, like a lot of people do smoke crack and you have no idea. You have no clue. Because they act exactly like a normal sober person would.
For example, our parents a lot of my childhood. They were on crack, but they acted to 80% of society just like an average middle class couple.
Yeah.
You would have never guessed.
They were likable and good. They were known as good parents, and their kids were so kids were so polite and so smart.
Like,
And
we got praised all the time for being like great kids and having great parents.
yeah,
Well, I did. Gravy wasn't exactly a great kid, but that's because they were a
I
bitter
was a
teenager.
lovely kid.
Were you?
But yeah, I don't remember too much of Colorado. I just remember
I remember everything of Colorado. I could give you an in-depth. That's probably the only time that I do remember chronologically. Like, it's burned into my memory. I don't think I could forget those things if I wanted to, because that was like very literally my developmental years. We experienced a lot of things together, and a word that you'll probably hear us say a few more times is parentified. At the time, our parents swore up, down, left, and right that we weren't parentified. But for those that don't know, parentified means that a child is put in a position of a caretaker. We were having to constantly worry about feeding ourselves. We were having to constantly think about how we were going to, like, get to school, or I was going to get to school. Gravy dropped out. But I was like, how am I going to get to school? How am I going to get food? There's no groceries. All we have is a mini fridge and it's empty. Our mother just disappeared for 2 days. Our father's been gone for a week. And right now, this isn't chronological. Like, there's a lot that we haven't skipped over, that we skipped over, because for a time like Colorado, it's going to be much easier to hit the broad strokes, then go back and really flesh out each thing. But just know the vicious fighting, when we say vicious, we mean vicious. Like,
we mean like you could hear them from streets away.
yeah.
Like, and
When we
that's
say
not
that the
even
police
exaggeration.
department,
That's not an exaggeration at all. We literally had people tell us we can hear them screaming from this street.
half of Manitou Springs knew us, which doesn't say much because it was a small town, but it does say a lot because it's concerning that half the town knows you as the child of the screaming couple. When we say that the police department knew us by name, we mean they knew us by name. Not just our parents, they knew us by name. They saw us and they were like, oh, they, we were like the talk of the town, very literally. My friend's parents knew about our parents, before I even met my friend's parents. Before
And
I even spoke about any of that to my friend.
we're running
At the
out of
time.
time for this episode, but just to mention one last thing about Colorado, about how really screwed up Colorado was. Biscuit skipped an entire year of school, and luckily he's still going on to graduate. Like, he's on course to graduate. He's going to be a senior in the fall. But like, my parents allowed him to basically skip an entire year of school, just do nothing.
So what led to that is that, like, there's a lot that happened before this, but um the context there, they wouldn't enroll me. They were not honoring the McKinney-Vento Act. So honestly, if my parents were on meth, they could have sued and won. But um they were not valuing the McKinney-Vento Act. They would not enroll me because we did not have an address, because we were homeless. Um and I just was never enrolled for my 7th grade year until the end of the school year. And obviously skipping over a lot that happened in between, just to like flesh out this specific point, I was only enrolled for 2 months of 7th grade. It was actually a month and a half. It was the last month and a half of 7th grade I was enrolled, And the only reason that I didn't get held back to take 7th grade again is because I sat down with, it was me, a state representative attorney, a school board district, the superintendent, and a lawyer. And I had to sit there at, I would say 12, 11 or 12, and I had to argue why I should be allowed to go forward. I had to do it. I didn't have people sitting next to me advocating for me. I had to sit there and look at the superintendent, a lawyer, a bunch of other people, and be like, this is exactly why I believe I should be allowed to continue to 8th grade without taking 7th grade. And it was because I passed all the state exams. I was always before that in advanced classes. The only stipulation to them allowing me to go into 8th grade is that I could no longer be enrolled in advanced classes.
Which he is now in advanced classes.
Exactly.
Again. So, anyway, that's it for this episode. Next episode, we'll talk about some more things that happened in Colorado, because there's just so much that we really can't talk about in this episode, because this episode will go over like 2 hours if we keep talking.
Yeah. And we're sorry for this episode kind of being all over the place. When it comes to topics like this, it is very difficult to just kind of like logically and sensibly in order talk about this stuff, because it's trauma and your brain literally is like, no, don't remember that. So what me and Gravy do is we don't want to sit here and write a script for these episodes, because that's just not who we are. We don't want to sit here and say, scripted, this is how traumatized we are. We are going through this, like, we are in the moment deciding what do we want to say about this. So
this is like a therapy session, but you guys are the therapist.
The silent therapist.
And we can't hear you.
Yeah. So it's just like, it's going to be out of order. As we continue, things will start to make more sense. But episode by episode, it's going to be complicated. And it's just, that's how it's going to be. Because unless we were to sit down and like write out a 3-act structure for each episode, it won't make sense. And we're not going to do that, because we want this to be organic. This is our story, not something that we're sharing for no reason. We're sharing this because it's healing to us, because the shit that we've been through is crazy. And as time goes on, you'll see more of that craziness. But that's just a little like tidbit that I want to say, because we know it's complicated. We know it's out of order. We know it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But as you listen to more episodes, you'll be like, okay, you'll be able to form your own timeline, essentially.
Yeah. And before I end the episode, I just wanted to say thank you for the support on our first episode. We got more views and listens than I thought we were going to get. And we've gotten not a lot of followers, but a good amount of followers on TikTok, and that are constantly liking our posts and viewing our story and things like that. And we just really appreciate that, and hope that you guys continue to listen and share with other people.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's it.
That's it.
Okay, bye.
Biscuit and Gravy out.